Alright, going to be replacing the glow plugs and the under valve cover gaskets on my 97 Ford F350. It should be very similar for pretty much any 7.3 Powerstroke. Now, given I'm going to be working around electronics, I'm going to disconnect both batteries, and I'll go ahead and also probably disconnect my air intake box since I'm going to be starting on the driver's side over here. Okay, over on the passenger side, got the air intake off. Sorry, driver's side, I should say. Got these two bolts down here. They look like they're holding on this air intake. So I'll take those out, and then I'll take out that main boot right there. Go figure, I already ran into a hiccup. So you try to get this bolt down here right below, and you can't get that off. So there's these two bolts right up top holding on this air intake. I'm going to pull those out, and I should be able to undo the boot. And then, yeah, that thing's pretty loose, and it should come right off. And then I can access that lower bolt. I'll be access the valve cover too. Alright, crankcase ventilator is now off and along with the intake tube. So my little tube there is a little bit messed up, and I ended up having to kind of break the clamp, but I'll just use a regular hose clamp later so I can pull it off. So I'll finish taking this off and see if I can loosen up all these bolts around the perimeter, and then go from there. Alright, so now I'm going to pull off these wires here that go to the intake valve cover gaskets themselves. Alright, on the driver's side here, you're going to have a couple of these really studs, is I guess what they are, kind of, and they were sitting underneath that little plate. These, you can just handle those with a 13mm or a 1/2 inch deep well socket. I have that here on my little driver. Now, the other thing you'll have to worry about is there's a bolt right back here that's cut right behind what people call the doghouse, the crankcase ventilator. I guess valve is what it is. But there's a little... You can take these off, but I've heard that with age there's O-rings in here that seal up, and they, unless you're planning to replace them anyways because maybe they're leaking, I've heard that they swell up from all the gases and everything that go inside the engine crankcase, and that you put it all back together and it's not ever going to seal right, and you'll eventually have to replace it anyway. So I'm going to avoid taking mine off by just using regular old open-end wrench. Probably one of the hardest bolts that I've ever had to pull, because it is located right back there. See right there? There's like maybe an inch of clearance there. But I got this little tiny socket, and this is 3/8. I was able to just barely sneak it down here and get that on there, and I was just barely able to get it. It is a real pain. Now, luckily these bolts in here are not very tight, so once you get it undone, you just break it loose, and you can do the hand tight the rest of the way. I don't know, maybe an extension would work, or a little swivel might work. I tried it, and I didn't have any luck using this thing, but I was finally able to just get it with this little tiny 1/4 inch drive socket. I mean, it's a real pain. Alright, let's see if I can get you all a good action shot. Once the valve cover, and you finally got everything loose. It comes right off there. Now I'm going to try to be clean as I can about this. Ooh, got that. Okay. Well, there they are. There's 4 injectors on this side. 300 and something thousand miles in this thing. Let me go ahead and put it a little closer. Here's what we're looking at. Right down here. Well, you got these just regular little connectors that go onto your injectors themselves. Like pulling that out. And then the valve cover gasket is just this big whole thing around here. And it should, yeah, pop right off. There you go. So that's going to come off there. And I'm ultimately going to replace this, but I'm going to get everything unhooked first. So each one of these, for each cylinder, there's 4 cylinders on this side. We've got an injector. We've also got a glow plug right down here. Okay. So there's that. Okay, glow plug's jammed. Way down in there, I don't know if you can see it or not. Yeah, alright, inside of all these little glow plug ports, now you can see that one. See a lot nicer sitting right down there, because there's actually a whole bunch of oil sitting around them. So what I've done is I'm taking a little bit of compressed air, and I'm just very, very gently I think this one will be blowing them out. And what that'll do is that'll help prevent any oil that would normally, from any of that oil from actually falling into the cylinders. Because the last thing I want is for there to be a lot of incompressible fluid in there and causing this thing to basically crack a piston or something stupid like that. It's just not worth the risk, so just blow it off to play it safe. Alright, I'll take a look at it. Got myself a set of 8 new glow plugs here. I guess that's the part. These are supposedly all Motorcraft. I've heard it's best don't use anything except the Motorcraft brand, just because, like auto lights, especially the ones you can get from AutoZone or whatever, I've heard they like to break off into the cylinder heads. Yeah, that's dog ginger. I also got myself a new glow plug relay as well, so we'll be replacing that in time. Alright, pulling these glow plugs isn't bad. I got myself a 10mm deep well socket. It goes on there and give it a good twist. Alright, a little snug in there, but not too tight. So get that loose, and then what I'm doing is I'm able to pull the whole thing out. Now, some people said they've used like vacuum lines and stuff like that to help unscrew it like this, but I'm fortunate. When it comes to working on mechanics, I've got small hands. You know, that happens too. Oh, nuts. Oh, socket just fell down. Anyways. Okay, I gotta do some fiddling. Alright, so those glow plugs actually were not very bad at all. They're actually really easy to get in. And you just got those all in Mexico like regular bolts. So I'm gonna put this new valve cover gasket on there. This is a Dorman brand. It's off-brand. I know it's a lot cheaper, but it still seems to it's a lot cheaper, I say, than the Motorcraft. But something I do like about this over the Motorcraft are that the inside here, where a lot of the Motorcraft 7.3 valve covers actually have a separate harness under here, and they can actually get unclipped right here. And I'll show you that on the old harness, or yeah, old valve cover and everything. But this way, you know, that isn't a problem anymore. They can't come unclipped. But let's just go ahead and put this thing back in. Of course, I got all the mating surfaces and everything cleaned up really well. Use some brake cleaner. Seems to work pretty well. A little word of caution when you're putting all this together. The valve cover gaskets actually go in a certain way. You can see we have these little notches. Those actually face up. And then also, there's little prongs here that should be facing downward, and those actually help align it and help you hold it up. See the little prong right there. A little blurry, but that's what prong I'm talking about. They should not be facing up. This is very smooth around here. I was putting it together and realized that, man, these wires looks like they're going to chafe against a lot of these rocker arms and everything. I'm thinking, you know, that's not good at all. That's definitely not good. These have a kind of a neat design to where the wires are just barely tucked away to where they're not interfering with the injector spillway spouts, and they're not interfering with any of these push rods as well. If you don't get them in the right spot, there's a chance you're going to chafe a wire, and you're going to be a whole world of hurt because you're going to have power going places it shouldn't, and you're going to be shorting out injectors. Also, another really neat trick, old farmer's trick, is to put just a little bit of grease on the end of your bolts after you've cleaned them real well. Now, it doesn't take much, talking just a little smidgen or so like that, just anything on there. What that'll do is that'll create a little boundary, and it prevents rust from forming and keeps moisture out. And believe me, this goes a really, really, really long way when it comes to keeping your bolts from getting stuck. Especially if you're planning to hold on to something for a while, and you might need to take out the piece again. So try this out. It's basically the world's cheapest anti-seize. Okay, well, it's time to start doing the passenger side valve cover now. And it looks like it's actually a little bit trickier to do. I ended up pulling off my map sensor. There's a little bolt right there. And that bolt, I have it kind of screwed temporarily back on there. And that actually fit in the slot on the map sensor itself. And then it also has this little clip down here. And this actually slides on to sort of that plastic rail down there that slides onto it. You use a screwdriver, pry it back a little bit until it'll slip it off. Now let's disconnect this hose. I have a little more room to work. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to see if I can get this heat shield out of the way, because, well, those bolts in the back can be a real pain to get to. So I'm going to see if I can clean some stuff up here and get this all out. They went ahead and I peeled back that heat shield and just kind of stuck it down there. It basically, it's like cheap chintzy aluminum foil. Now what I'm doing is there's this box here. I'm trying to pull it off. There's a bolt right here. And there's another one right down here as well. I don't know if I get the camera, but it's right down here. They both could be 8mm. So I'll get that off and hopefully I can get this box out of the way. It's removable and give me a little more room to work. Well, I got that little box off. It's really kind of a goofy thing. It actually looks like it's maybe just like a vacuum reservoir or something in that sense. But I pulled that off. And then, well, similar to the story that we had on the driver's side, of course the bolt in the way back, that's really hard to get to. And you can see, you can see the hole right there. This one's actually like a heck of a lot easier, but I'm just using, I can just use that 3/8, or sorry, 1/4 inch drive ratchet with a really small socket. And that seems to work the best for this. So, this can be pretty much standard procedure. I already disconnected the little wiring harnesses, and also, of course, the batteries still disconnected. I'm going to pull off my, looks like I might need to pull off this dipstick. Let's get it out of the way. So there's looks like maybe a couple 10mm bolts there. I'll pull those out. So I've got a 10mm bolt here holding on the dipstick tube. Just right there. Pull that off and free that area up. Alright, the rest of this looks pretty much straightforward. I've got a couple bolts down here that looks like they're going to be very similar to how we had to do on the other side. Grab maybe like deep well 13 or something of that sort. And again, all these are appear to be 1/2 inch, and they should be pretty much just like the other side. So I'm not going to cover too much detail on these just because I already did the other side, but it's going to be the same thing. Pull out all the bolts, and then we'll just pull out the glow plugs and screw them in just like doing spark plugs. Nothing too complicated. Alright, this is the bracket I just pulled off. This will hold the dipstick tube on. So let me see if I can show you how real quick so you can get an idea what's going on. So dipstick will go right along here, and then this little bracket, so it just kind of slips right in there, and the bolt goes in to close it up, and that's what holds that in place. Now this bracket is pretty much just like the one we pulled off on the driver's side. It's pretty standard. You got the nuts over here, and there's studs inside too that we still have to pull out. But that's pretty simple, not too complicated there. Okay, now when it comes to putting in these glow plug connectors, let me see if I can show you a little trick that I've been doing. They're really tight fit, which is good because we need to consider, you know, how rattly these diesel engines are. You don't want them coming out loose. No pair of locking pliers, and then you just kind of sit them on there. Oops, you know, it's hard to do this one hand, but just give them a good push. Alright, another thing that I'm working on is, you can see this is the driver side injector harness connector. You can see it is completely like fried off right there where the glow plug is in place. I've heard it's a really common problem for the driver's side to, I guess, have that happen on these OBS Fords, which is probably why later on Ford updated their design. But my valve cover gaskets came with these new pigtails to fix it, so I'm going to do the task that I've been dreading and actually cut these wires off and then replace them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go one at a time, just to make sure that I don't miss any of the wires up. Okay, before I actually do involved in this, what I'm doing is I'm actually prepping all these wires on my little pigtails. They've got little tiny ends on them, but that's not good enough for me. I want to have a nice, good connection. So I'm just taking a little knife, kind of going around here and cutting off the insulation. Alright, got those all. Let's see if I kind of get you all an idea of what I'm doing. So you can see this one's definitely fried, and there's where the good one is. Now I gotta make sure these have both the same orientation, and I'm only gonna do one wire at a time because I do not want to mix these up. You don't want injectors firing the wrong time. That would be devastating. But what I'm gonna do is I already stripped this wire here a little bit. I can see it corresponds to the furthest right. Okay, so I'm gonna do the exact same thing. So furthest right. Alright, I'm going to separate it out, and I'm going to kind of flare these out a bit. Wait, before I do this, I need to get my shrink wrap. Alright, I got my shrinker up. These just some standard heat shrink tubing. Picked up from Napa. You actually got to slide these on before you splice them together, of course. So at this point, this is basically just a pretty standard soldering job. My main thing is, you know, I'm working on my freaking engine, so, you know, the 7.3 is not going to run very well without these. Now, another thing I'd heard is that these things shrink to about half their size, and so you want one that's going to be a nice snug fit. And this appears to be pretty good. So I'm going to get a little bit of this dielectric grease. Put on here for it's good to. It should have a good electrical connection as is. So just put a little bit of that on there. Well, I think I just finally got all these wires all soldered together. It's a bit longer than it originally was, but that'll probably be fine. I can just tuck it all away. But what I'm going to do is I noticed that there's this little bit of foil around the injector wires themselves. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some aluminum foil. I'm going to continue wrapping that around there. And the reason I want to do this is, you know, you might think it's a little bit goofy, but I'm going to do this because there was obviously some reason that there was wire on there, that there was aluminum foil on there to begin with, or some sort of foil. And I suspect that it has something to do with the, I guess, electrical currents and everything that's occurring. Basically, magnetic fields and electric fields, well, you can generate a magnetic field from the pulsating electric fields that you have going on here through the injectors. And it can actually induce a current in some of these other wires, just by kind of the nature of electricity. And so I'm thinking that the aluminum they had here, or whatever material they had, was some sort of shielding to help prevent that from traveling. And so I'm going to, for better or worse, put this around here, and then I'll also wrap this all really heavily in electrical tape and everything, and just make sure it's all good to go. That'll hopefully help prevent the wires getting hot and ensure that there's hopefully a better electrical connection, because electrical resistance actually goes up when your temperature increases, and this thing is right next to the turbocharger, so having a cool area wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. Something like that should do it. Alright, well, it's time to finally replace this relay. Get all these things out of here. This whole one out. Alright, now I got those two bolts out. This thing just comes right out. Gonna have to save all the little connecting bolts. It looks like this, you know, for your Motorcraft one doesn't come with new nuts or anything, but whatever. Alright, put a little grease as always in these little studs. Help go together a lot better. Got that. Alright, that should do it, guys. I think the glow plug works, or hopefully the glow plugs all work, and the way to try it out is do a cold start tomorrow morning and see what happens. Alright guys, I'm going to be doing a cold start. It's about 34 degrees outside, a bit colder. So we're going to see how all this works with the glow plugs now. Alright, here we go. Well, there you go. You can definitely start a lot better than it would have otherwise without those glow plugs. So. Well, this pretty much does it for this video. I hope you guys are able to get some help out from this, and hopefully this will help you when you need to replace your glow plugs or whatever. But in the meantime, thank y'all for watching, and hope y'all have a great one. Thanks.